welcome to the fourth video of our automated security testing using ZAP series. So agenda of this tutorial will be, we will be going through the context creation, and then we will be seeing that how we can import that context, and we will also see why we need to import context during each run. Okay, and then few of the mostly used active scan parameters. If you remember, last time we discussed the active scan, and then within that active scan there were various parameters, so we will be discussing a few of them in detail. And then we will be running both active and passive scan together, because for this thing there will be separate report. We will also be needing to clean the scan tree after each run, right? So these things we will be performing today. For first part, creating the context, let us go to this ZAP, and then what I'll do, I'll add some URLs to the scan tree first, and then we'll add those URLs to a new context. Okay, so for this, let me move to Postman. Here we have our endpoint to add a URL to the scan tree. Okay, and if you see here, the URL has been added, right? This is first part. The second part is I have created one more URL here, and I'll add this one as well to the scan tree. So if you see here, now you have first this one and then this one, right? So we'll do one thing, just right click on this particular one, or you can do the complete from here. So we'll include this in context, and let us change the context name to demo context. Okay. Now you have a context stored. For exporting it, just click on this button, export the context. Here you can select your context, say my one is for demo context, and then yeah, you can keep the same name, demo context, and now just save it. So this is the basic home directory under which this will be stored. Let me show you. So under your computer, see users, Atul, and within here, yeah, this is OWASP ZAP, and then context. So every context that you will be exporting by default will be exported to this particular location. Okay, now I'll show you why we need to export and import the context. The reason for that is, say if I close this session, right, I've closed the ZAP. Now I will again reopen it. So it will take some time to reopen, but once this will be reopened, you will be seeing that the context that we created earlier is no longer there. So that's why it is important to create a context manually, and then like that is one time activity only. Once a site is there, you will be creating a context. Okay, you do not need to automate the creation part, because mostly the context will remain the same. Okay, you automate is something you need to perform again and again, right? So that thing is not required for creating the context or exporting the context. We can do that manually and then import the context which we have created. So if you see here, we do not have any context or site tree. So for importing the context back, like there is this particular endpoint. Under context, the endpoint is context action import context. Okay, so this is the parameter context file which it will be taking, and you can have the same file name which you have defined there, and then you can use it. Let me show you how. So I have already created the endpoint here, and the context file name for me is demo underscore context. I'll kept it like this only. Okay, and then we can just click on send. So if you go back to the ZAP, here you will see the context has been added, right? And the context is in the same state in which we added earlier, like we added this particular URL to the context. Okay, so this is how we can import the context, and we need to keep a note of this on this as well, context ID, as we have done earlier in our previous methods, like how we can store the response. We can implement the same thing for storing this particular context ID, and then this particular context ID will be used in our active scan as well. Here within your context id you need to pass an integer only, and the integer will be the same which you are extracting from here, right? So this is how we can import any context, right? So the next part of our agenda is that we need to discuss the active scan parameters, right? So for this we'll again go back to the postman first, and here we will see all the parameters I have included which we are going to use as part of this demo. Okay, URL we already know. So starting with the context ID. So we can extract the context ID from this particular response. As of now, this contains two. So I'll mention here two only, right? Now to see the difference between when a context is there and when a context is not there, let me make a change. I'll go to the ZAP, and first we need to add a site. So for adding the site, we'll repeat that thing. We'll go here, add a site, and let me add one more site here. Okay, so now we have two sites added here. So if I do not use say if I do not use any kind of context, then let me show you how the scan will work. So if you are seeing, it is like kind of scanning all the URLs which are here under the scan tree, right? We have this particular request and this particular request as well. So I'll do one thing. You can see both of them have been scanned, right? Here we have UI, and here yeah, this is UI and this is 8080 slash. I'll do one thing. I'll go to this particular endpoint and I'll say exclude from context and exclude from our context. So I have excluded this particular one. So the very next time, like when I use this particular context again, just need to select it. Okay, now it has been passed as a parameter, and I'll click on send. So now you will see that UI endpoint will not be there. See, there is no scan being done on UI parameter, UI endpoint, sorry. So that's how the context come into the picture, and there is many other things that you can do which we will be discussing later as part of our other demos. Like you can have authentication, and you can, like, you have the authorization defined here as well, session management, users. So all of these things are normally defined within a context, and you can define that context one time and then import that context, do it like before your scan, and then the id context id that you have received after importing the context, you can use that context id for a active scan. So the next parameter which we will discuss is recurse. So if you are not providing this parameter, this is by default going as true, and when recurse is true, that means that every endpoint which is under the scan tree will be scanned for the active scan. Okay, so if you let me trigger this by sending it as true first. So this is equivalent to, like, if you are not sending the recurse at all. So this is equivalent to the same thing. So now we have only one endpoint here, UI, defined under this, and if you see, UI is there, right? But if I'll say that this is recurse as false, and then I hit it again, this time you will see that UI is not there, right? So it hasn't scanned the uh, endpoint which was under this particular main URL, because we have marked recurse as false. We only want to hit that particular endpoint which is we defined in the URL section of our active scan. Okay, so this is the difference between recurse true and recurse false. Then the next thing is, like, we can discuss about this in scope only. So for this, what I'll do, if you go to, this is also achieved with the help of context only. So within your context, if you see that there is a thing marked as in scope, so there are, like, there can be multiple context, and everything, like, if you have, for a context you have selected as in scope, then the URLs which are included in that particular context for which that in scope is marked as true will be considered the URL as part of in scope. Okay, so for this, what I'll do, I'll remove this for now. For the demo purpose, I'm going to remove it. Okay, and by clicking this particular button, you can see what is in context and what is not in what is not in, scope. So as of now, if we see this thing, as of now, both of these are in scope. The reason for that is, like, we have this thing mentioned here, like, uh, this particular context, this is in scope, and then the context URL which are here, this is also in scope. So we will do one thing, we'll just keep it like this only. So that means that UI part shouldn't be in scope anymore. See, UI endpoint is not being displayed anymore, but if you say that, show me all the URLs which are not in scope or in scope, so you will see that UI is there. But as soon as you say, I just want to see the URL which are in scope, only this one will be displayed. So now, if I again I have unchecked the recurse one and I say in scope only true, so this time again as well you will see that UI will not be there. Okay, but if you say this as false, then UI will be there, right? So you need to keep in mind, like, what whenever there will be multiple context, okay, you need to take into the consideration that what are the URLs which are defined in each of the context, because if a context is considered as an in-scope context, that means that every URL which will be included in that particular context will also be in scope. So this is how the scope thing works. And then the next parameter we have to discuss is, yeah, scan policy name. So this one is quite straightforward, and for this is always retained. Like, this is not like context which will be lost once you close the ZAP. So under this policy manager, scan policy manager, I have created a policy, and this thing we have discussed earlier as well, that how we can create the policies. And this is policy which I have copied from the default policy, and I have turned all of the rules uh, as off. So for turning these off, or to set them to some other level, you can just play around these things. And this thing we have already discussed in the second demo of this series. So you can refer to that to understand what is threshold, what is strength, and how we can make a policy. Okay. So as of now, let me just close it. And let me trigger a scan using this policy where I have turned everything off. I'm just showing you the difference when a default policy is there. So if you are not defining anything, that means this is a default policy which is consideration, which is taking into the consideration. But as we have defined a policy here, now this one will come into the picture. See, as we have turned all the rules of scan completed immediately, right? So this is about scan policy. Now, coming to the default values of this, so scan policy name we already discussed. This will be considered a default policy if nothing is provided. For context ID again, it will be default context if nothing is provided. Recurse by default is true. Okay, so if you are not providing recurse, as we discussed earlier, this will be true. But in scope only, it will be by default as false. Okay, because uh, if you do not have any scope defined and you are triggering it, everything which is under the scan tree is being uh, triggered irrespective of whether that thing is in scope or that thing is not in scope, right? So these are all the parameters which we are going to discuss as part of our current demo. Okay, and this thing also we will be implementing in IntelliJ. So for that, let me move to IntelliJ now. So here we need to pass the context name first, which we want to import. So again, you can have these values in a config file as well, or you can pass it from your maven command as well as a command line argument. But for the demo purpose, let me use it from program itself only. Context name equal to demo underscore context. Okay, and now we need this context name within our, like, we need to perform the active scan, right? And we need to import this context before that. So let's do it from here only. I'll pass it context name, and we're going to adapt our method perform active scan. Okay, okay, and here we will call a method which will return the integer, right? Context after import, and we need context name for this. Okay, here we are. So this is within context, and then import the context name. Okay, return. We'll have a string first, so we need to convert it. API response element, API response, and then route get value, right? So here we are going to have a string, and then we are converting that string back to an integer. Then we are using that integer here. So if you want the, well, see the value of the context ID that will be used, context. Okay, we need to add the exception. That's it. And now we can perform the active scan, and we'll see whether the context ID will be generated or not, and we should see a context here as well. So let me remove it from here, right? Triggered the test case. In some time we should be able to see a context here, then a side tree, and then a active scan. See, the context ID imported is 6, and same we can see here as well. If you go to this demo context, this is the context ID 6, right? And the same has been used here. This is our active scan which is in progress as of now. So once it is completed, we will be able to see this thing active scan is completed. Okay, so that's how we can use the context, and similarly we can use the uh, other parameters that we discussed earlier, right? Those are quite straightforward. Only the context ID was something which we needed to, generate a method first and then get the value from there. So I have demoed that part. For others, you can use directly, like recurse as true or false. Similarly, the in scope only as true or false, right? Now coming to the last part of our agenda, which is how to run both active and passive scan together. And for this, we will be generating different reports, and we need to clean the scan tree after each run as well. So we need to go to ZAP test first, and here let me uncomment this thing. Okay. And again, guys, passive scan is something which will be going through the proxy. So anything that you need to scan, you need to perform the manual action within this method. Okay. And then once you're like, see, you want to register the user, you want to log in, then you want to perform some certain activity. So you can call your basic page objects and from this method itself, and in the end you will be having a consolidated report for your passive scan. And for active scan, this is more automated way of scanning. You do not need to perform any manual actions. Okay, so whatever under the scan tree, it will be scanned automatically. As of now, we are adding URLs manually to the scan tree, but normally there is a spider functionality within ZAP which automatically scans all the URLs and add those to the scan tree. So we'll see those things in our future demos. So as of now, I have uncommented both passive scan and the active scan. And this is at the rate after method under which we need to perform some certain modification. Like first one will be we need to generate the ZAP report. So both of them should have different name, right? So for that, what you can do, call this method dot get name. So this will give you the method name, right? And you can just remove the test part from this particular thing. Dot replace say test with blank. Okay, so now you will have two reports with different name. One will be like your ZAP report, and then the postfix for that report will be active scan. For other one, it will be the passive scan, right? We are taking it from the method name. The second thing that we have to do is we need to clean the scan tree. we'll create this method within our zap util. Okay, and after generate report, and here public static void. Now we need to clean the scan tree, and for that there is a typo. Let me correct it. Yeah, okay. Now what we need to first get all the URLs from the scan tree and then remove them one by one. For removing the scan tree, for removing the URLs from the scan tree, we have already seen this, created this endpoint within core actions and delete site node. So this will be deleting each URL one by one. Okay, so let me show you by Postman first. So we have one URL added here already. Let me add one more. So this one. So now we have two URLs. You can see get scan tree URLs from here, and here you will be seeing two URLs. So the first thing is, uh, like if we get all of these URLs, right, we can delete them one by one. But there's a catch in that as well. So let me show you. Say if you pick this URL first, okay, you deleted it. You got a OK message. Now here we are already done with the first URL, right? We tried with the second URL, but the second URL will not be there. The reason for that is you already deleted the parent node. Once the parent node is deleted, the child node within that particular node will already get deleted as well. So if you will try this again, you will get an error like this particular URL is not there. This has already been removed. Does not exist, right? So let us program this thing as well. So for this, we already have a method for getting all the URLs from the scan tree, right? So what we can do, we can have a for each loop here. We can string URL get URLs from scan tree. So this will give us list of string, right? All the URLs will be there. Now we need to first check whether this URL is present within the scan tree or not. Okay, so we initially we have the all the URLs from in form of list, right? And then let me do it here. This will be simpler to understand. So I'll have a list of string. Here you can mention all the URLs. Okay, so you got the URLs for very first time, right? It had say two URLs. In our case, like we have already added two URLs, but in real case application there will be multiple, right? So after this, you fetch the very first URL from the scan tree. Before removing it, you need to check that particular URL is already in scan tree or not. Otherwise, you will be stuck in that condition where you will get this kind of error that this does not exist. For very first URL, yeah, it's straightforward. It will always be there. But after next, you need to check that dynamically if that URL is present or not. So for that, what you can do, you can have a if condition, and you can get all URLs from scan tree dot stream dot anymatch Here you can have s dot contains URL. So if this condition is satisfied, like there is, you are checking each of the URL, and then you are checking that if there is a URL which is containing that, okay, only then you do this thing. So the next thing is, like, we need to remove the URL, and for that we already know that we need client API dot core dot delete. Okay, take the URL, and it has two more parameters, but we do not need them as of now, so we can just have a normal empty string for them. Okay, so this will clean the scan tree after each run. And you can also check after the run is completed and you have executed this clean the scan tree. Here we can have a verification step as well, whether to check whether the scan tree has been cleared or not. For this, just to get URL from scan tree. So this time there should not be any URL, right? Equal to 0. Scan tree has been cleared successfully. Else you can throw a runtime exception with, because otherwise you are seeing the wrong results in the next run. Right, so this is it. Now go back to Jab test. Oh, and we have, like, I have made one more mistake here. This shouldn't be the URL to test. This is a report name that we are providing here. So here we can have another parameter report name, and we need to remove this. This was for formatting, and here we can give report name. And yeah, we are sorted for this. The next thing we also need to do is, after each run, like, we have created a context, but that context we are using just for active scan, right? So if it is an active scan, then we need to remove the context as well. So perform active scan, wait till active scan is completed, and here we can do that thing. Let me show you in Postman as well. So this is the endpoint for removing the context. And if we, like, add check, we go to the JAP, and if we check, like, as of now there is no context. Let me add one, import one context here. So I have imported the context, right? For removing the context, you just need to pass the context name. I have taken this, again, this particular endpoint from the API reference that has been provided by JAP proxy, right? So within context, here we have remove context, right? So as of now we can see a context is there. If I click on send again, the context is removed, right? So we can remove the context once our active scan is completed. So I'll go to IntelliJ, and here API response equal to client API dot context dot remove context, and we know we are having the context name here only, so we can remove it. And here we can have a verification that if API response element, API response dot get value dot equals. Okay, scan context has been removed. Okay, we are all set. Now we have, yeah, both the passive scan and active scan, and we have the tear down step as well. We are generating the different report. We are cleaning the scan tree after each run, and now let me execute it. So we should have two reports, one for active scan, one for passive scan. And after each scan, we should be able to see a message in the console that the scan tree was cleared. First active scan is being performed, and context was imported as 9. Context has been removed. If you see here within ZAP, there is no context now after the run. That means we were successfully able to remove the context after active scan. And if you see that scan tree was also clean. And we have different report for both passive scan and the active scan. Now if we move back to the notes of this particular demo, we have covered everything which was there in our agenda. We created the context, then using automation we imported the context and removed the context, and then we discussed all the parameters which are there in the active scan, right? And then we executed both active and passive scans together. And in our upcoming videos we'll see that how we can spider the active scan. So by spidering we will be able to automatically add the urls under the scan tree instead of manually adding the urls one by one. And normally whenever the active scan is performed, spidering is the prerequisite for that. And then we'll replace the zapClientApi method with the restassured. So instead of using the zapClientApi functions, we will be hitting the endpoints which zapClientApi has exposed, and we will be using the restassured to manipulating those endpoints, right? So this is it for today's demo, guys. I'll share all the notes and the GitHub repo link to the description section. And in case you are liking the videos that I'm creating, please do like and subscribe, share the feedback in the comment section, and see you in the next video. Thank you.